notoriously coat these boxes when they're cold. That should be reverse. We do have a reverse and I've stole it. Let's see if we can get a reverse. Coat these boxes when they're cold. That should be reverse. And there we go. We do have a reverse and I've stole it. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome back to another video on the Ferrari 328 GTS restoration project. Now, this is one of my all-time favourite classic cars. This is something I've wanted to rebuild for a long time. Never thought I'd get this opportunity to do this, so to actually have this car featured on the channel feels like a bit of a dream come true. This car has actually been off the road since 2009. This was found in a barn in Knutsford. We collected this car about 2 weeks ago, and as you can see there, we've done quite a lot of work to it in the past 2 weeks. There is 2 previous episodes on this car. If you've not seen them, you can catch them now, and I'll put a little card up here for you to click to get over and watch those 2 episodes if you haven't seen them already. So on this episode, guys, we're going to be concentrating on the front suspension, and again, you'll have seen on the previous episode we actually got all that front suspension stripped down. Now, we've had a little bit of news. We've actually now got this car booked in the paint shop on the first week of December, so we're now on a bit of a tight deadline to get all the running gear completely sorted on this car, ready to go into the paint shop in the first week in December. Now, as we're saying on this episode, we are going to be concentrating on getting this front end rebuilt. All the suspension components were stripped on the last episode are now ready to go through the shop blaster, so we're going to be running those through the shop blaster. Once they're blasted, we'll get them back into the workshop. We'll have to grind the old bushes out because on these particular cars the bushes are actually tack welded in. So we've got to grind those old welds off, knock those old bushes out, and then now our new bushes have actually arrived, which I'll show you in a moment. We've had some goodies arrive from various different suppliers. So we're going to be doing those bushes. Once those are done, then we can actually start to prime and paint all our upper and lower wishbones. We can also strip our shock absorbers and get those shockers and springs painted as well, and we've also got new bushes for those shock absorbers to fit. So plenty to be on with in this episode, guys. So make sure you stick around to the end and let's watch the front end of this car get completely rebuilt. And over here we have some new bushes which have just arrived. So these are our shocker bushes, the front and the rear. We're going to be rebushing the front and the rear of this vehicle. We've got some new anti-roll bar brackets. For the price of these, it just wasn't worth sending these away to be replated. These have come brand new and they're quite cheap, to be fair. These have all come from Superformance. We've also got some of the rubber bump stops for the engine compartment lid, and also some rubbers for the drop links on the front axle. Just had these delivered over from the States. These have come pretty quick, to be fair. These came in about 5 days, so I was quite surprised how quick these turned up. So these are actually OEM bushes, should be as good as, or if not better than, the originals. So let's get all this stuff loaded into the car. Let's get it in the blaster. Let's get So we've got all these blasted now, back out the cabinet. They've come up pretty well, to be fair. No, not really much pitting or anything in these. They've come up really quite good. There is a few tiny little bits I've missed. It's quite difficult to see every little nook and cranny when they're in the blast cabinet with all the dust and everything flying about. So there's a couple of little bits like that, but we can prep these by hand now. These will need a little bit of final preparation. And then obviously the shockers, we're going to paint these individually and get these as good as we can. We'll probably strip these and paint them separately so we can get the original Coney stickers back on the inside as well. So we'll be splitting these at some point. But yeah, I'm happy with that. We can now actually see the welds on these bushes, get these welds ground off, knock these old bushes out. We can give them a little clean up inside where the bushes are going, and then press our new bushes in. Right, so the next thing we've got to do with these is we've actually got to somehow get these little welds off these bushes, these little tack welds. Now some of these are going to be quite awkward to get into because obviously with the gap between these two bits of steel here, it's going to be very difficult to try and actually get a grinder in there. So I'm not entirely sure how we're going to go about this yet, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. We've got the same again on this side of the bush. I've got to get these old bushes out. I do have some new bushes. Right, so we've got the welds ground off this bush. As you can see there, we've just ground these edges off to break these welds. So what we're going to do now is give these a couple of smacks with the hammer, see if we can release these from the wishbone. Hopefully that one will come out and then we can spin it around and get this one out as well. Right, so that is one done. Those bushes are in there now nice and tight. We just need to give these a little tack. I've just been and tried these on the car to make sure that these bushes are in the correct position and there isn't any big gaps between the brackets on the frame and on the bush itself. They fit nice and snug, so now I'm pretty confident I can tack these in. A couple little tack welds on there. Ideally I could really do with a TIG welder for this, but unfortunately we are only using a MIG welder in this workshop, so a MIG will have to do. I'm going to turn the power right down, and I'm also going to get some water and give this a spray. As soon as I've welded it, spray it, cool it down to prevent the internal bush from melting due to the heat from the MIG. So fingers crossed guys, let's see if we can get this done without damaging these bushes. Right guys, so that is one wishbone done. Got our little tack welds on there. Might just grind these welds down a tiny little bit just to make them a little bit more subtle. But that is in, that is solid. That'll do us. So now it's just time to do the same all over again on the lower wishbone, and then again on the upper and lower wishbone on the other side. Right, so the first thing we're going to do here guys is we're actually going to try and clamp our shock absorber and spring into this spring compressor. We're going to compress this and release this locking ring out from underneath here. We can then release the pressure off this and remove the spring from the shock absorber before we actually try and take these bushes out, because I don't particularly like working on these while this spring is under load, because this can cause quite an injury if this was to go wrong and this spring suddenly released itself from a shock absorber. So let's get this clamped in, guys. Let's get this spring off. We'll make this safe, get this shock absorber in the press, and then start to try and press these old bushes out. Right, so as you can see there now, guys, the weight is actually off this spring. We can actually now unpick these locking rings out of here. We can release the pressure off this clamp and then hopefully extract the spring away from this shock absorber. Right, so that's one done, guys. Let's get the other one on. Let's get that one split as well. Right, so with both of our shockers now stripped and released from the springs, we can now start to get these in the press and press these old bushes out. Right guys, so we've got our first shocker set up there in the press. I'm not entirely sure if this is going to work first time around. I may have to make some adjustments to what I'm using here as press blocks, which is basically a couple of sockets. So I'm going to give this a go. If this doesn't work, we'll have a swap around and look at a different way of doing it, but fingers crossed this works first time around. Right guys, unfortunately that didn't work. It's quite difficult to get anything to sit on these because you've not got much of a gap there to get anything to sit on, and also it's a chamfered edge all the way around, so every time you try and press on it, it's just trying to kick over to one side. So it's proving very difficult to get that out in the press, so we're going to go to a plan B. I'm actually going to get these in the vise. I'm going to give these a little bit of a warm up, and then we'll see if we can smash them out with the air hammer and see if that works any easier for us. Right, so this isn't really the way I would have liked to have done this, guys, but I'm clutching at straws at this point. We've tried it in the press, it's not worked, so I'm going to give this a little bit of heat and hopefully these will simply knock out with the air hammer. So we've managed to get the centre bush out, but unfortunately there is still a steel sleeve inside there that does need to come out. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use the air saw. I'm going to try and split this down the middle, and then hopefully that should chisel out fairly easily. I don't want to start going too mad with the air hammer on that, because we risk bending this and also causing some damage, and which could result in the new bush not going in correctly. So let's try this, see if this will split it and knock it out. Right guys, so we've got the bushes out of our shock absorbers. That's both of those done. So we can now start to press our new bushes into those. And you'll probably also notice there that we've got our upper and lower arms hung up and in primer. So with those now shot blasted and in primer, we can start to get some paint on these. I was originally going to send these off for zinc plating, but I've been advised against that because apparently the process of the zinc plating can actually make these brittle, I'm being told. Don't know how true that is, but at this point I'd rather not take that risk. They was painted from factory, let's paint them again. So I'm actually going to do these in red, the Rosso red, just to break it up a little bit. There is an awful lot of black going on underneath of the car as it is. We've already done the frame, as you'll have seen on a previous episode, in black. So there's a lot of satin black going on. So to break this up, we're going to do these arms in red. We will also do the same on the back. We're going to paint the shock absorbers in the Rosso red as well, but then we'll do the actual spring in black just to break that up a little bit. So let's get some paint on these guys, let's crack on. Well, that is our upper and lower wishbones now painted in a nice bright Rosso red. We've also threw some lacquer on these. They should look absolutely fantastic once they're dry and on the car. Now we are struggling a little bit here guys with these shockers. I managed to get this bush in that far and I can't seem to budge it any further than that, so I do not want to risk causing any damage to these shock absorbers because they are quite expensive to replace. So I'm actually going to take these down to a local engineering firm and have them press these bushes in there for me so I know they are correct. It's a bit of a shame, but again, I do not want to cause any damage to these guys, so unfortunately it is what it is. Right, so that is going to bring this episode to a close guys. Unfortunately we didn't get quite as far as we'd like to have done on this episode, but it's all progress. Again, this is the first time I've ever worked on a Ferrari, so it is all a learning curve. We did struggle a little bit with those shocker bushes, which did slow us down quite a lot. We are going to get those over to the local engineering firm tomorrow and get those bushes pressed in properly. Once we've got those back, we can paint them shock absorbers and then start to rebuild everything back on the front of this car. Again, this car is booked in for paint in the first week of December, and before it goes for paint we are obviously going to have to get all this running gear done, front and the back. We've also got to weld our full front clip back onto this car before paint, but before we do that, we're going to check that everything under here is operational. We're going to check all these radiator fans actually switch on and work, and we're going to test the wiring from the bulkhead to those. We're going to check that these headlights actually pop up and work as well, and also all the fans under here, and just check all the wiring and go through this with a fine-tooth comb, because once that front clip is welded on, it's going to be very, very hard to access any of this lot. So again, we are going to check all of that under there. So I hope you are enjoying this rebuild as much as we are, guys. This is going to be a very, very exciting project for us, and there's some very, very exciting things to come on this build. So please click subscribe, guys. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all on the next video.